The secret book of James claims to hold teachings Jesus shared only with his brother James, wisdom too radical for the early church. Written in the 2nd century, this Gnostic text was part of a hidden tradition that challenged what Christianity would become. And here's a curious fact. The text mentions Jesus laughing at the disciples' fear of death, a side of him you won't find in the Bible. So what did Jesus really tell James? And why was it kept a secret? Well, let's find out. James the Just, who is Jesus' brother, wasn't a background figure in early Christianity. He was a leader. He was known as the head of the Jerusalem church. James was a cornerstone of Jewish Christianity, a movement that stayed rooted in Jewish law and tradition even as the faith spread to Gentiles. The New Testament gives us glimpses of his influence. In Galatians 1:19, Paul calls him James, the Lord's brother, and in Acts 15, James presides over the Jerusalem Council, deciding how Gentile converts should follow Jewish practices. He was respected, even revered, earning the title the Just for his piety and commitment to justice. But his relationship to Jesus has always been debated. Some early traditions, like the Proto-Evangelium of James, claim he was a stepbrother from Joseph's earlier marriage. This preserves the idea of Mary's perpetual virginity. Others, including most modern scholars, see him as a biological brother, one of several siblings mentioned in Mark 6:3. Either way, James held a unique position, close to Jesus in both family and faith. In the secret book of James, he is more than a brother. He is a spiritual confidant. The text says Jesus chose James to receive hidden teachings after the resurrection, setting him apart from the other disciples. Some scholars, like Robert Eisenman, argue James was the true heir to Jesus' legacy, a leader who emphasized Jewish roots over the universalizing mission of figures like Paul. So why did James fade from the spotlight? As the church grew, its focus shifted to Gentile converts, and James's Jewish Christian perspective may have been deliberately sidelined. Does this mean he was the keeper of a different Christianity, one the early church wanted to forget? The secret book of James frames itself as a letter from James to an unnamed recipient. But its core is a dialogue, Jesus speaking to James and Peter over 550 days after his resurrection. This isn't the Jesus of the canonical Gospels who dies, rises, and ascends. Here, he lingers, sharing wisdom meant only for a select few. The text says he appears in a form that could be seen, suggesting a spiritual rather than a physical presence, which aligns with the Gnostic idea of a divine realm beyond the material world. What does Jesus teach? First, he redefines salvation. No one will enter the kingdom of heaven because I ordered it, he says, but because you yourselves are full. In Gnostic thought, being full means achieving gnosis, which awakens you to your divine spark. This isn't about blind faith or following rules, it's about self-discovery, a radical departure from the orthodox idea of salvation through grace or sacrifice. Jesus even pushes the disciples to teach others, saying, "Woe to you who have no need of me, and woe to those who do not become sober." Sobriety here isn't literal, it's a call to spiritual clarity, to see through the illusions of the material world. He also prepares them for hardship. No one will persecute or oppress you other than you yourselves, Jesus warns. This is a profound idea. The real battle isn't with external enemies, but within. The rulers he mentions, likely spiritual forces in Gnostic cosmology, will try to deceive them, but the disciples' own doubts and fears are the true obstacles. At one point, Jesus laughs at their fear of suffering and death, a striking moment that shows a Jesus who's almost playful, challenging their human anxieties with divine perspective. And finally, Jesus describes his mission and departure. He says he came to dwell with the disciples so they could join him in the heavenly realm, a place he calls the Great Light. He's returning to the place from which I came, sitting at the Father's right hand. But he adds a twist. The Father does not need me, but I need the Father. This flips traditional Christian theology where the Father and Son are co-equal in the Trinity. In Gnostic thought, the divine hierarchy is more complex, with the material world seen as flawed and created by the demiurge, while the true God exists in a higher realm. And Jesus here is a guide, a revealer of divine knowledge, leading his disciples and through James, us, toward that higher truth. This isn't the sacrificial savior of the Gospels. It's a mystical teacher offering a path to enlighten. The secret book of James comes from the Gnostics. Gnosticism often saw the material world as a flawed creation and a prison for the divine spark. and their texts, like this one, focused on escaping that prison through gnosis. But that worldview put them at odds with the emerging Orthodox Church. By the 4th century, Gnostic ideas were branded heretical and their texts were suppressed. The secret book of James, along with dozens of other Gnostic writings, was part of the Nag Hammadi library that was found in Egypt and happened to survive the purges. So why was this text excluded? Well, for one, its teachings challenged the church's authority. If salvation comes through personal knowledge, what need is there for priests, sacraments, or a structured hierarchy? The text's elevation of James over other apostles, like Peter, often threatened the narrative the church was building. Peter, seen as the rock of the church in Matthew 16:18, became the symbolic foundation for the papacy, while James's Jewish Christian perspective was less useful as Christianity spread to Gentiles. Some scholars argue the early church deliberately marginalized James to consolidate power. His vision of Christianity, rooted in Jewish law and esoteric wisdom, didn't fit the universalizing mission led by Paul. There's also the question of authenticity. Most scholars agree the secret book of James wasn't written by James himself. It's a 2nd century work attributed to him, a common practice called pseudepigraphy. But that doesn't mean it lacks value. It reflects ideas circulating among early Christians, ideas that didn't make the cut when the New Testament was finalized at the councils like Nicaea, or Nicaea, however you want to say it, in 325. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi text in 45 blew open our understanding of early Christian diversity, showing how many voices were silenced. And we're still finding more. In 2017, scholars at the University of Texas uncovered Greek fragments of a related text, the first Apocalypse of James at Oxford. These fragments, dating to the 5th or 6th century, proved these ideas were circulating in their original Greek form, not just Coptic translations. The past isn't done speaking to us. It's just starting to reveal its secrets. So what does the secret book of James mean for us now? At its core, it's a call to look within, a challenge to find your own path to divine knowledge. Jesus' words, "Be sober, be full," feel like a timeless reminder to seek clarity in a world full of distractions. In an age of information overload, when we're bombarded with noise, social media, news, endless opinions, this idea of spiritual sobriety resonates. The Gnostics were onto something. True wisdom isn't handed to you. It's discovered through introspection and questioning. The text also invites us to rethink what we've been told about Jesus and Christianity. What if the Jesus of the Gospels is only part of the story? The secret book of James paints him as a mystical guide, not a sacrificial savior, and it elevates James to a role we rarely hear about. This isn't just ancient history. It's a prompt to question the narratives we've inherited. What other truths have been buried by the winners of history? All of them. The Gnostic quest for gnosis mirrors modern movements like mindfulness and self-discovery, where the focus is on inner growth over external rules. Even the idea of internal struggle, no one will persecute you other than you yourselves, feels relevant. How often do we hold ourselves back with doubt, fear, or distraction? There's a broader lesson here about hidden knowledge. The secret book of James survived because someone cared enough to hide it, to protect it from destruction. The act of preservation reminds us that the truth often lies beneath the surface, waiting for those willing to dig. Whether you're spiritual or skeptical or just curious, this text challenges us to ask hard questions. What do we really know about the past? What do we really know about ourselves? And maybe the real secret isn't in the text, it's in the search. The secret book of James gives us a glimpse of Christianity that could have been one where Jesus' brother held the keys to a deeper, more mystical truth. It's a window into a forgotten past, and it's also a mirror for our present, asking us to seek our own divine knowledge. But what do you think? Is there more to the story than we've been told? Well, of course there is. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. Have a great day.